Paula P. Works here, coming to you once again with One Piece chapter 1167. 67! Okay, I did the joke, so hit me with that subscribe, won't you? Anyway, the title is called Ida's Son. We cut to 33 years ago, 5 years ago after the God Valley incident, in which a very young Morgans, he seems to be a teenager here, he's interviewing a person about this giant monster that they saw. And various people keep talking about this giant monster who attacks pirate ships. But then an interviewer asks a fisherman if he was in the Florida Triangle, and he says no, but we did see a monster, and that monster seemed to be human shaped. It's interesting that the Florida Triangle is being mentioned here, the chapter after God Valley has sunk into the ocean. That's a little interesting. But to continue, the monster in question is Harold, who has been working in tandem with the world government to atone for the 1,000 years of history by the giants. So that's kind of interesting, and it leads to something else later. But we then cut to what's going on with Kaido, Newgate, and Big Mom, and it says, meanwhile, the pirates who had gone their separate ways after God Valley continue to rise in prominence, and over the next decade or so, each of them would peak to become a defining face of their generation. And that's true because Kaido, Whitebeard, and Big Mom all become Yonko in the present. And then they give us a shot of Wang Ji and Shiki, and it says most of these pirates simply clash over territory. However, cutting to the Earl Jackson and the Roger Pirates, one crew broke through all the others and achieved a feat long believed impossible. They circumnavigated the entire world. They were hailed as the crew of the King of the Pirates, Gold Roger. The public execution of the captured Pirate King was meant to serve as a spectacle, a display of the world government's power. However, the world was plunged into even greater turmoil as countless souls set out in pursuit of the vast treasure Roger left behind, the One Piece. So that's the start of the entire narrative. But then, no one had anticipated the advent of the Great Pirate Era. Navy headquarters found itself caught off guard. As a result, more than 10 giants were drafted into the Marines from all over the world in an effort to consolidate strength. So now we know that the giant squadron are from corners of the globe. They aren't from any particular nation. I wonder if anybody in the Marines other than John Giant himself is from Elbaf, because so far he's the only Elbathian giant that we know of, and not many people in the giant squadron are named. I think one other guy is named. His name is like Lons or something like that. So that's interesting. And there's only one female giant that we ever see, the giant blonde woman, who is also unnamed. And that one guy who dresses up like a cat. So he's weird too. He doesn't have a name either. But yeah, this is when the giant squadron was officially established. John Giant had been a part of the Marines for a minute at this point because Mother Caramel talks about him. So yeah, that's when we see that Harold had gained enough reputation to meet with the audience of the Five Elders. As it says, during this stretch of time, Harold waited on the Navy hand and foot, and that very year he was finally granted formal permission to visit the Holy Land, and he was given something called a shallow sea contract. And it's very interesting that it's called a contract, but this makes him something called a God Steel, which is a rank in which he is in assistance to the Holy Knights. The Five Elders go on to say that there are 3 levels of the contract: the shallow sea contract, which is a minor pact, the deep sea contract, and the deep sea contract are reserved for those who are bound to the true deity fully. There are only 13 individuals in the world who receive that privilege. And the Herald mentions, what do you mean by deity? Nosjuro retorts and says, you will only come to know the greatest depths of this world on the day you become a full Holy Knight. And this is when I stop it here and say, way back in chapter 1140, it is Killingham who mentions a mark that allows you to travel through the abyss pentagrams. So, seeing as how the contracts are shallow sea, deep sea, and deep sea, I think the most illustrious contract has to be a contract of the Abyss, which allows you to both summon and travel through these pentagrams, most likely produced by Emu's ability by setting up a pact with Emu themselves. That's what I think. And I had said this a while ago in so many videos. There are tons of them. I'll link a random one, but yeah, there are tons. In which I thought there was levels to this because of how different the Five Elders pentagram looks as opposed to the pentagram used by Shamrock and then by Gunko. So I don't know, bro. It's very interesting now. So I guess when you're a Five Elder, that's perhaps an honor deeper than the Abyss. Because why do their pentagrams look different? So instead of there being perhaps 3 levels, there could be 5. So shallow sea, deep sea, deep sea, Abyss, and then something up below the Abyss. Or you are in full communion with the monster after you traverse the metaphorical Abyss, perhaps. And that's where you're in full communion with Emu, the devil. So I could see that being the case. So yeah, I was right, y'all. I knew there were levels too. I knew there was, because it didn't make sense. But yeah, that's when Harold commits himself to being a government dog. And we get to see a middle-aged Saint Garling. Wow. And he is being met by Harold at the Knight's Temple of Shangara. The interesting thing about the name Shangara that I found is that Shangara is an indigenous traditional dance and music style originating from the Shono people of Zimbabwe, particularly in the Mashonaland and the Midland provinces. It is known for its high energy and social nature. So, this building may have belonged to the Lunarians before the world government took over the land of the Red Line. I think that could be the case. And I just wanted to put that in there because I got the hankering to look that up as soon as I saw it. So that's very interesting. Very interesting indeed. And that's where we have a little conversation between Harold and Somers, in which Somers says, "You're going to obey us even though you're a king of Elbaf?" And Harold agrees. And that's when Garland says, "We'll keep a long distance transponder signal on hand and call you if we ever have a need for you. You'll be free to travel the surface world, but you are forbidden to speak of our dealings." And Harold agrees. So Harold is a full-on dog. So call Harold Fido because he's out here chasing bones for the man. Goodness gracious. Anyway, in the conversation between Harold, Somers, and Garling, we also see a young Shanks because we see a young man with shaded hair. And since the hair is short, that's most likely Shanks himself. So I'm not sure if Shanks is a full-on rat, but we're kind of there, sort of. We'll go into it a little bit later. But now we're at 20 years ago in the Ryugu Kingdom of Fishman Island, in which Harold and Neptune are having a drink and a laugh. In this conversation, Neptune brings up that he is going to have a daughter due to the predictions of Madame Charlie, and he wants his daughter to be wed to Harold's son, Loki. And that's when Loki's dad, Harold, makes a very funny joke that's quite similar to the joke that Roger makes when he visits Neptune for the second time during his last voyage, and calling Shirahoshi Shaggy. And he says, "Here's to the futures of my mischievous troublemaker and your little Mosa Mosa." And Neptune retorts and says, "Don't call her that, she won't be Shaggy." And as we know, the transponder snail, which is also Shaggy because it's a winter breed of transponder snail that Loki is talking to, is for Loki's friend Mosa. So a while ago, a lot of fan art came up about Mosa possibly being Shirahoshi. And now, since this joke has been repeated, I'm thinking that might be the case. That Mosa, that translates to Shaggy, could just be Shirahoshi. That may not be the case, but I'm leaning more towards that being the case now. And it'll be super funny if Loki finds out that Luffy and the crew are already friends with Shirahoshi. So that could be a Brook and Laboon situation if they ever find out, because this feels like the same setup. It really does. And that is what endears Loki to join Luffy in the end. I could see that being the case. I really could. That would be interesting, because it's wild now that Neptune wants to set Shirahoshi up with Loki. And I wonder why, with this being the case, was he set to marry Charlotte Lola at a point in time? Was Harold trying to plan against Big Mom? I can't wait to see how that pans out, because that's interesting. So, in the same year, so 20 years later, in the same year, we cut to Elbaf at the Owl Library. And this might be after Saul escaped Ohara, because he's not a Marine anymore and he seems to be scarred up. So this could have been after the destruction of Ohara took place, because Robin would have been born at this time and she would be 8. So this is a weird bit of time that this is being contained in, but I think that's the case. And it's interesting too that we're seeing him now, because at this point, after he deserted the Marines started letting in giants in on a bit of a massive scale. So that's quite odd how the timeline is being set up. And it's weird that he had that misconception of Elbathian giants, and now he's being introduced to the concept of setting up a school in Elbaf. So maybe this is why his perception started to change as he saw Harold change, perhaps. Maybe so, maybe so. Then, 15 years ago, we cut to Mary-Joie, the Holy Land, in which the big jailbreak is happening, being conducted by Fisher Tiger. Fisher Tiger comes across Shanks by the looks of it. And this is why it's weird, because we only see one eye of Shanks as he cuts Fisher Tiger's shackles, and he lets Fisher Tiger know that the armory has been unlocked for him, so he can continue his rampage and free the slaves. So Shanks is not a rat, but his intentions are odd. That's when we see a young Hancock, a young Sandra Sonia, my favorite. Hey, baby girl, yeah! I am so tempted to make Sandra Sonia the thumbnail just because. I might do it. We'll see. If you're seeing this video, I probably already did it. But yeah, so this is where Sandra Sonia, Hancock, and Marigold are free. But quite oddly, you know who else we get to see? We get to see Koala. Because someone says, hurry, Koala, you have to run. How odd. We've done so many videos on Koala. I'm just saying, it's kind of interesting that all these big events are focusing on people who aren't Jinbei, but who are associated with Jinbei. It's so interesting because we have Fisher Tiger here, and now we have Koala. I'm telling you all, Koala's gonna be important. I'm just saying, because again, we're focusing on her right here, and that's when the Boa sisters make their escape. And it says this attack on the Holy Land was carried out by Fisher Tiger. In the wake of this incident, he will go on to become the captain of the Sun Pirates, and we know that. In the aftermath of it, Harold is actually introduced to Shanks. Shanks is said to be the same rank as Harold, which is God Steel. And Harold knows Shanks from somewhere, presumably, but that's when Shanks turns on the privilege and says that he doesn't know Harold, and Harold is just a commoner. But Harold probably knows Shanks from the Roger Pirates' ship, the Oro Jackson, because he probably met with Roger once upon a time back in the day. What's so interesting about this, too, is that Garling has high hopes that Shanks will achieve the same rank as Fergalin Shamrock, his older brother, at one point in time in the future, because at this point, Shamrock is already a Holy Knight with a deep sea contract. So that's pretty wild. I wonder if the captain of the Holy Knights, of which Shamrock is now in the present, I wonder, do they get a deep sea contract? So right now, does Garling have that? Maybe, maybe not. We'll have to wait and see. But then Shanks goes on to inquire to his older brother if he has any leads on who actually caused the incident of the slaves breaking out of Mary Schwa. That's when Shamrock urges Shanks to take his time because he's still recovering, as we see that he has a bandage over his eye. Now, a ton of people were saying when this chapter came out that Shanks is the man with the eye patch. That's not true. His eye is just bandaged. I don't know why so many people were perpetrating so much misinformation, but that's not the case. So I have made videos. I'll try to find the video I made about it. I'll put it right around here. But I made a video stating that I don't think it was Blackbeard who gave Shanks the scar. Because it's weird that if this is supposed to be known information that Shanks brought up when he met Whitebeard in the present during the pre-time skip, it's weird that we keep dancing around it, especially seeing as how we were introduced to a young Teach during the early parts of this Zebek flashback. So it's weird that we're dancing around it here when it should be already known information, which makes me think there's something more to it. But to continue, Harold is still pondering about Shanks as he tries to put on in saying that he hates the surface world, because of course Shanks is trying to cover up his true intentions, presumably. But then we cut to Elbath in the fishing village during that same year. And quite sadly, Ida has fallen ill. Mato and an Elbathian doctor are watching over her. And that's when Big Boy Loki shows up. And he's killed an Elbathian bull who's way bigger than him, which is odd. In which he says, "Hey, foreign hag, cook this meat up for the foreign hag, won't you? The tavern's my main hangout spot. I want her to reopen it." Because, of course, it's been closed since she's been ill, which is pretty sad. However, at this point, Haruden and the boys have already set sail in search for a doctor for Ida. Ida doesn't want everybody to be concerned about her, including Harold, who has been urging the elders to anoint their wedding, and they just won't because Ida is foreign. And we find out in 1137 this never happened. They were never able to marry. That's so sad, bruh. Man. Yeah, so Ida never became the queen of Elbath, and her union with Harold was never recognized because they did not want a foreigner to be the queen of Elbath. That is crazy. But then Loki shows why he's one of the best new characters in this series, because he goes to the alcohol village, the hometown of Loki's birth mother Estrid, and finds out that presumably his uncles and such not only bad talk Ida, but are responsible for her illness as they have been slipping her poison. But Loki takes it upon himself to burn the whole village to the ground, rightfully so, and has his uncle in his clutches. He says, "I still remember my birth mother. She hated me. She had me thrown into the realm of the dead." He remembers that. Who gives a crap about inheritance? Your whole family is nothing but trash. Now answer, Ida won't actually die, will she? She's the only mother I've ever known. I love Loki. Loki is the best. And we get a little shot right before that in which Ida's in bed and she's huffing and saying, "Loki is still my cute little son," which I love a lot. I love Ida. I hope she's okay, because we get no real confirmation on how she is in the present, as far as I know. I believe she's still alive and this didn't do anything, but we have to wait and see. Because I took a look at chapter 1137 and that's not mentioned. It's just mentioned that Loki and Haruden had different mothers, which we know that. So yeah, we don't know the fate of Ida, but I do think she's alive. And that's when the chapter ends. I wonder how long this flashback is going to go on for, because we still got some information that we need to go over. Okay, well, I'll be here for it. With that being said, give me your thoughts and tell your friends about Polypede. What?